Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Watch me burn. Ah, Chenko, what? Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, I'm going to be showing you how to EQ vocals the right way. Now take it from me that this is the only vocal EQ tutorial that you are going to need for you to be able to level up from beginner to pro. Right, I said it. Now the thing with mixing is that it is both a science and an art, which means that there are rules, but then there are no rules. But the way I like to see it is that there are no rules, but then there are guidelines, and these guidelines are what will generally, help you or put you on the right path to getting to your desired results without any hassle, without second guessing your decisions, and then without feeling like you are not doing the right thing. So let's dive into the DAW and let's get into the video. Alright, so for purposes of this tutorial, I've gone ahead to prepare a demo. A lot of you will know this song. This is Love the Way You Lie by Eminem featuring Rihanna, and I'm going to use this to show you how to approach EQing vocals. Another thing I intend to achieve with this video is to guide you on how to choose your EQ. One thing is to know how to EQ, another thing is to know which EQ to use for which purpose. There are lots of EQs out there in the market, and I'm sure that every engineer has a dozen of EQs to pick from, and sometimes it's a hassle or a confusion which EQ to go for, whether you want to go for a more digital EQ or an analog emulation type of EQ. So this video I'm going to show you how to EQ and also how to select which EQ to use for your mixing purposes. Okay, so that we don't hear or we don't keep listening to the very raw form of this audio of this my take, I'm just going to quickly throw on a tuning plugin. So I'll just do auto tune. I think this is in the key of let's set that to major. This is in the key of B flat if I remember correctly. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Yeah. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Alright, so this makes it so that the audio is a little bit more easier on the ears to listen to. Alright, so now before you go on to EQ, there are things that you must do. First of which is you have to really listen. You have to listen to the vocal you want to EQ in the context of the entire song and really listen for the frequency balance. That is the major thing that you want to do, because what EQ does is to increase and decrease, to boost and to cut certain frequency ranges so that you have a general balance in the entire frequency spectrum. So what you want to listen for is how boomy the vocal is, or how light, how bright it is, how dark, how warm, all of these things. And then you decide, okay, against the music, how do you want this vocal to fit in, or how do you want this sound to fit in? Do you want it to be warm compared to the entire mix or the instrumental, or do you want it to be light and really drawn into the mix, or you want it to stand out and really be upfront, have a more forward mid-range? So these are the things that you want to think about before dialing in your EQ. And the way I like to do it generally is, for my subtractive EQ, which is the first move that I like to make always, is to remove unpleasant frequency resonances. So after I've listened and I've decided, okay, this is how the audio sounds, or this is how the vocal sounds, and this is how I want it to sound. So the first thing I'll have to go in and do is remove those things that are making it not sound the way I want in the mix. So we have to remove, or not really remove, but reduce those frequencies so that it's less present, and then we can hear more of the frequencies that we want to feature in the vocal EQ. So having said that, the first thing that we're going to do is load up Frequency, which is Cubase stock EQ plugin. Now when you listen to this, just gonna stand there and watch me burn. So looking at the frequency spectrum on this vocal as it's playing, you can immediately tell what is happening, right? Although I would always advise to use your ears and not your eyes, but then this gives you a visual representation of what you are hearing, just in case you are not very confident in making the right EQ moves. So the first thing that we can obviously tell is that there is a lot of low end rumble. You see this range right here? All this information is contributing nothing to the sound, and we really need to take it off. This here, you'll see, is where the fundamental of the vocal begins. Right, there are certain times when I sing certain low notes, and then it comes, you can see this, right up to this point, which is about 120, maybe 130 hertz. But then before, right under that, you have all this noise that you do not need. So what you want to do is do a cut, and I'll activate the linear phase, and then take this all the way up to 100 hertz. That's alright, because I love the way you lie. Now we've eliminated all that low end rumble, and you can see we still have the vocal sounding natural. So even if I take this in and out, the vocal doesn't change. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. The texture of the vocal doesn't change, which goes to show that everything that was happening here was not contributing musically to this piece of music. So that's the first thing that you have to do, is cut out all your low end rumble. Now how far up you go is really dependent on the texture of the vocal and the song. It's song to song dependent, but then the guide is that typically from 70-80 hertz all the way up to 100, sometimes maybe 110 or 120, everything within this range is not needed in a vocal, right? You don't need 70 hertz in a vocal unless that vocal is really singing like really low notes, where 70, 80, 90 is where the fundamental of that vocal is sitting. Other than that, you do not need anything that is sitting way down here, so you cut all that out. So I'm going to be turning off this frequency chart in a little bit so that we can really tune these vocals, or we can dial in these EQ settings with our ears and not our eyes. But then before I do that, as it was playing back, you could tell that this vocal is quite low mid heavy, right? It's really low mid heavy, and there isn't much happening in the mid range, and I want to bring out that mid range a little bit and then control the low mids, take it back a little so that it's not masking the mid range. And then we want to also take into consideration this range right here where we have the sibilance, because it was really poking out at some points where I had S's and T's. So that's the first thing that we have to do. So first off, let me turn off this frequency chart so we can really dial this in using our ears. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. So like I said, you want to be targeting that low mid region, and that's usually between 200 to about 400. So really listen to find the spot and then cut it back. Now another guide that I like to follow is, if I have to boost and sweep, I cannot boost more than 6 dB. This is my own guide, this is not a general rule. The reason for this is, if I boost something 6 dB, I should be able to hear a difference, right? I don't need to boost it all the way up to 24 dB for me to hear that, oh, the sound coming from there is really unpleasant. 6 dB is about enough for you to hear any audible changes. If I boost a particular frequency band by 6 dB and I don't really hear any difference, that means there isn't really much happening in that frequency range. So 6 dB of boost, and then I sweep to find those pockets where I don't really want to feature, and then I take it back a little bit. So let's listen. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. So if you can hear at some point where I'm singing in the lower register, this area here, you really hear that very warm sound, and I just want to back that off a little. I like the warmth, but then I don't want it to overshadow the mid-range, so I want to just take out this range a little bit. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Maybe too much. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Alright, so now that this is sounding a little bit better, let's look for those sibilances and then just try to work on those. Typically you'll find sibilance around the 4K to 7K region, so I'll start here at 5K, just boost it to 6. I'll tighten the Q a little bit so that we can really hone in and look for those S's and T's where they are really unpleasant. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Apart from the sibilance, I can also hear some kind of harshness in this range, this 6.3K range. So I want to take that back a little bit and then see how that affects the sound, if that improves the sound or not. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way. I think that sounds better, right? That sounds really good. So another area that I like to really hunt for unpleasant frequencies is around the 600 to 800, 900 range. I'm not really hearing it right off the bat, but then I want to just really go back in there and check to see if if I have that nasty nasal frequency there that I want to take back a little bit. So like I said, I'm only going to boost by 6 dB, and if I boost by 6 dB and I sweep and I'm really not hearing anything, then I'll just let it be. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Right, so right there is just there's something really ugly about this. Let's listen to it again. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. It's like I'm singing from around my nose region, and that sometimes blocks the clarity in the tone and in the voice. So you really want to just take that back a little bit so that the vocal can be a lot clearer. And remember, I said that this vocal performance doesn't have so much mid-range content, and by pulling back on this nasal frequency, that will help us to hear the mid-range a little bit better. So let's take that back. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. So let's listen to what we had before all of this, and then we'll listen to how it's sounding now with this. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. And after, just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Really small change, but then that helps the vocal to sit a little bit better with the pianos and the pad. I feel like every time you go into EQ, you don't have to do so much. Just listen to frequencies or listen for frequencies that are really bugging, really disturbing the sound, or that are really not contributing anything to the sound, and just, take them out a little bit. Sometimes you might need to do it, a little like this. Sometimes you might need to go drastic, but then whatever the situation is, just really listen and make sure that every move you make is helping the sound get better. That is the essence of everything that we're doing with the EQ and with mixing generally, is we're making the sound better. We're taking it from 5 to 10%, from 50 to 60%, just little increments in quality, in tonal quality, and that really is what mixing is all about. I can still hear a little bit of harshness in the upper mids, around the highs, so I want to look for around this band right here, and just sweep around and see where those harshness, that harshness is coming from, and just tame it a little bit. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Right, just right there. Sometimes the highs can be too sizzly to the point where it becomes harsh. A lot of people like to add air to their vocals, but then before you start to introduce air, make sure that the vocals are not harsh. Otherwise, it's going to make everything really, really nasty and really unpleasant for the listener to listen to at an extended period of time. So these small EQ moves that we've done has helped us to tame that really warm sound, that really boomy sound from the low mids, and also tame the harshness from the highs. Now this vocal sounds a lot better. Now the reason why you want to do this with a digital EQ, as you can see I'm using a digital EQ for this, is that the digital EQ doesn't impact the sound in any way. It doesn't inject its own color. It doesn't have a color or flavor. It's just flat. It doesn't add any kind of coloration or any kind of harmonics to the sound. So whenever you are cutting or boosting, you are just cutting what is there and not adding any more. So I like to cut with a digital EQ, and that is what I like to do, to make sure that I preserve the original tone of the sound while I'm removing the unpleasant frequencies that I don't want from the performance. Then I can now go ahead to boost with, I can still decide to use a digital EQ to boost, or I can decide to go for an analog emulation type of EQ so that I can get its character, its tone, the harmonics, whatever, its unique EQ curves, just to paint the sound a little bit, and paint it to life and give it a really nice, rich character, which is what I like to do a lot of the time. So now we're going to pull up an analog emulation, and there are tons to pick from. A lot of our favorite plugin brands, from whether it's Waves, IK Multimedia, Plugin Alliance, Universal Audio, a lot of them, Softtube, all of these guys make analog emulation plugins that we can use, and they all sound great. So whichever one you have, you can use whichever analog EQ that you wish. So for this tutorial, I've pulled up some EQ from some popular brands that we know. I have from Waves, from IK Multimedia, from Plugin Alliance. I'm just going to be using these three for purposes of this video. There are a lot more brands that make analog emulation EQs that you can choose from. So I'm just going to route this audio now into, I had it routed into the stock where I was supposed to use the frequency there, but I used it in here in the channel itself. So now let's route this channel to the Waves channel, and I have here an SSL emulation, an API emulation, and sadly I don't have the Neve emulation. Let me show you what the Neve emulation looks like. This is the Sheps, yes, I believe Neve 1073 or 1081 or 1083, I don't remember what this one is called, but this is the Neve emulation. So there are different console EQs, there are different desks, and these different desks have their unique sound and flavor and richness. So this here is the SSL desk, which is a very popular desk that everybody has come to know and love. This is the API desk, and I don't have the one I showed you is from the Neve desk, and these different EQs have the different ways that they impact the sound. So I'm using the channel strip from SSL. I've loaded the channel strip. Now we're going to add back the sound that we want from using one of these EQs. Each of these EQ have their own sound, like I said, have their own unique character to them, and which one you choose depends on the sound that you're going for. Generally, I like to use the SSL, right, because I like how warm and rich and full it sounds. Sometimes I like to use the Neve as well, and I use the API mostly on drums or percussions, because I found out that it sounds a lot more musical, on those kinds of materials. But for vocals, most of the time I'm using either an SSL or a Neve. Let's go with the SSL for this one and let's see what's happening. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So the first thing I want to do is to give this vocal, some shine, some brightness. Remember, we took some out, but this time around we're going to add some more from 10K and upwards. This is where we can start to introduce air to the performance. And the reason why you want to add it with an analog emulation EQ is that it has a way of creating a smooth top end. It doesn't sound harsh and it doesn't sound unpleasant to the ears. So I'll just go right at 10K and then I'll start to boost till I find something that is really nice to work with, and then I'll take that back to a point where it's okay and where it's feeling really balanced with the rest of the song. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Sounds, really rich, really high end. But then there's something I'm also noticing is that around the mid-range there's still this tone that I'm not really comfortable with, and I want to hunt for that tone and then take it back a little bit and see if that helps make the sound better. So the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to boost this all the way up. I have it at a relatively tight Q. So now I'm going to start to sweep with this, and the good thing I like about these console EQs is that there are no spectrum charts for us to look at. You really have to dial this in using your ears, and that way you are sure of what you're doing. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. Yep, this is the region I was really hearing, just right here, and then I want to take that back a little bit and see if that helps the sound improve. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Let me take this back a little. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. I can still hear a little bit of harshness, probably because since I've increased 3 dB at 10K, it's not really exactly at 10K that we're boosting. If you check the EQ curve of this SSL, you find out that it's a broad stroke, and this high-end boost is a shelf, it's not a bell, so it extends below 10K. So now I feel like that boost is also introducing some more harshness, and I'm going to hunt for that harshness around this 4K to 7K region, find it and then take it back. I also tighten the Q so that we can really hunt for it. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. Love the way you lie. So just somewhere around here. So what I'm going to do is to increase the Q a little bit, loosen it so that it affects a broader range but not too wide, and then take this back down. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Right, so this is sounding a lot better. We've gotten this vocal to really sound nice with the rest of the music. There's still a lot to do to it, like compression to really make it consistent and then really dial it in a lot more. But as far as EQ goes, I feel like what we've been able to achieve with the tone of this is already perfect. From here on now, we can now go ahead and do other forms of processing that we want to do on this sound. Now this is for the Waves SSL channel, so let's assume that what we have is the API channel and that's what we want to use for this. Now the API has different versions, so there is the 4-band EQ, this is the 4-band EQ, there is the one that's the 3-band EQ and that's the 550A, this is the 550B, and I've gone for this just because the SSL EQ has 4 bands, the lows, the low mids, the high mids and the highs, so that's why I've gone for this API 550B instead of the 550A. So again, let's see if we can get to 10K, right, and start to boost at 10K. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love. Now the first thing you would notice is that the decibels increases in 2s, I know, and is a lot less granular than the SSL one. So on the SSL one we had 3 dB of boost, but this we cannot go up to 3 dB, we can only do 2 or 4 dB. But what I'm noticing is that once we get up to 4 dB, it becomes bright, yes, but then the harshness in the high mids becomes a lot more apparent, unlike when we boosted with the SSL. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Even when it's at 2, I can still hear that harshness, and we found that harshness around, so let's say we're leaving this at this 2 dB boost at 10K. Now let's hunt for that harshness. We found it around 6K. Let's look for 6K. So there's no 6K here. We can only do, there are fixed points in this EQ and you cannot, choose the in-betweens. You can only choose what has been given to you. So the closest to 6K that we have is 5K, and we'll just go right there and see if we can, control the sound from there or control the harshness. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Yeah, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. I'm not going to be I won't lie that this sounds really good. It sounds nice. We have a clean top end and we've also reduced the harshness from that high mid, so this sounds nice, but then it sounds different from the SSL one that we had earlier. The SSL still sounds a bit smoother than this API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright. Let's hear with the SSL. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. API. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. SSL. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Yeah, so you can tell the SSL sounds a lot smoother, although they sound similar, but then the high mids and the top end sounds really smooth compared to this API version, and that is if you are using Waves. Now let's route this to the IK Multimedia bus and see what we can achieve with the IK Multimedia EQs. Right, so for the IK Multimedia, I have the British channel, which is the SSL emulation. Let me just reduce this. I have the API emulation, right, and then I also have the Neve emulation. So I have all these 3 EQs to mess with, right? So again, let's try to fine-tune this sound using one of these 3, and we'll see which one gives us the best results. So we'll start with the SSL. So first of all, let's try to get to that 10K. and start to boost and hear what we can get with this one. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. So for this, what I'm noticing is that for this top band, I have to push it a little bit more to get that level of brightness that we got with the SSL and the API. I'm really aiming to get that particular sound that I got with the SSL, you know, since this is also an SSL emulation. But for the SSL from Waves, I only had it at 3, and this one I'm going almost all the way up to 4 for me to get that top end brightness that I had with the one from Waves. And then I'm pulling this back a little bit. Let's see where we had the one from Waves. Yeah, so we had it at 3.4, and this one here we have it at, okay, this is 3, but we can still take it down to 3.4 and see, compare the sounds and see if it's similar or if it's very different. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. Okay, so we also had a little dip at about 900 on the low mids. So let me tighten this Q a little bit. Let's go to 900. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Okay. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. Let's route it back into the Waves and let's hear how that sounds. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Let's hear the IK multimedia again. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. They are quite similar, but then what I'm noticing with the IK multimedia is like there is a low mid bump that is happening. The low mid is a little bit more present, you know, when I switch to the IK multimedia than when I'm on the Waves. So that is going to make me take an extra step of looking for that frequency that's really poking out on the lows and then just take it back. But let's hear it one more time just in case you missed it. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. And the Waves. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. You hear how the Waves has a bit of a smoother low mid, you know, like it's not bumping it up, it just has a balanced low mid compared to the mids, but then the IK multimedia is really pushing up that low mid. So it's neither good nor bad, it just depends on what you want to achieve with it. So just know that that's the tonal character that the IK multimedia SSL emulation has, just in case that is what you want to achieve or that is the sound that you are going for. So let's try with the API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So it's already at 10K, and then we'll just give it a little boost at 3. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. So I think the default for this one is a peak. So for us to activate the shelf, we have to turn this button on for it to be a shelf instead of a bell curve. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So for the high mids, you can only choose between 5K and 8K, similar to what we had on the Waves version of the API. So I cannot choose 6 or 7K. I can only choose 5K or 8K, 10K, 3K. But then since 5K is what is closest to 6K, like what we had in the Waves version of the API, so we'll just go right ahead and just try to take that out and see what happens. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright. I would say that this one has a smoother top end compared to the Waves API. The IK Multimedia API has a smoother top end, you know, at a gain of 3. It doesn't sound quite as harsh as the API from Waves, right? So let's hunt for that 900 range. Okay, we don't have that. What we have is 1K, but then it's really close to 900 since we had it at 9 point something. So let's just take this out a little. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry, but that's alright because it's nice. It's sounding really nice. Let's compare it with the SSL from IK Multimedia. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. That low mid bump is really very, you know, noticeable. It's really very prevalent. You can hear it. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. So if I had only the IK Multimedia for this particular song, I'm going to be using the API version instead of the SSL just for this vocal in this mixing situation. There are situations where I'll prefer the SSL. For this particular song, I think I'm going to favor the API over the SSL. Now let's hear what the Neve is going to give to us. So again, we're going to boost at 10K. Let me just make this a bit bigger. This one is already a shelf, so we can only just boost. We can decide if we want a bell. You can see that here, but it defaults to shelf. So we are 10K and we're going to boost by 3. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because... Okay, so now that I have the Neve emulation on similar settings to the rest, let's hear what they all sound like individually. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. SSL. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Neve. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Okay, so from what I'm hearing, I think overall the API still sounds the smoothest next to the Neve emulation. I would favor SSL the least in this comparison for this particular song, like I said, but the API is really giving me that smooth, that really smooth sound that I want. The Neve version is giving me a smooth sound, but then I'm still getting, even though I've taken away some of the harshness around that 6K region, I can still hear the harshness still coming through. And that means that for this Neve version, I would have to really go in and dial back that high mids just a little bit more for me to get that smooth sound that the API has. So let's see if we can achieve that. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Neve. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn, but that's alright because I like the way it hurts. API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So really, if I was going to decide, I think I would have to really, sit with these two, the API and the Neve, and really listen to the entire song on each of these to decide which one I'm really going to go for. Really tweak some more settings and then see which one really benefits the sound. But overall, I think the API and the Neve, they sound a little bit smoother at similar settings. But I had to just dial the Neve emulation a little bit more for me to get it closer to what the API sounds like. And then the Waves one, yes, the high end sounds smooth, but then that low end bump, I can always go in there and take that out. But the fact that it's there, just makes me want to not feature it in this shootout, or what do I call this, in this song rather. So now let's look at the last, which is the plugin alliance. So let me route it to that, the plugin alliance. And on the plugin alliance, we have the BX Console 9000J, which is the SSL. We have the API, and then we have the Neve. So let's go in and then see what we can do with each of these. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. So the first thing we had this guy at 10K. I had this at 3. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Wow, this really brings it forward without adding a lot of harshness. I like. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Let's still go into that 6K region and see if we can pull out something, if it will make the high end sound a little bit more smoother. Let's hunt for it. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I'm really liking how smooth this is sounding. Really liking it. So let's look for that 900 range and just take it out. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. And this might be a sound that you want to go for, right? It sounds, let me say, different. It sounds different from the other ones. So at this point, I don't know if at these settings, because I'm trying to get them all to the same or similar settings. At this setting that I have it, I'm not sure if I'm liking the sound of it that much, right? So I maybe need to tweak it a little bit more here and there to see if I can get a better sound out of this. But it just sounds different, and for my ears, it's really not what I'm going for. Let's try the API and see what we can get with that one. Let's go to 10K if they will let us get. Can I can't edit. Okay, you just have to. Okay, this is the closest we can get. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Wow. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. Let's compare this with the SSL. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. I like how the API is making it sound really smooth, really natural, but then the SSL just sounds like there's something it's adding to it. It's smooth sounding, but then there's still something that it's adding to it that makes it not really gel well with the piano. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So I need to make this quick mention that all of these opinions that I have are mine, right? So this is how the whole thing is sounding to my ears at this particular point in time. I might come in another day and then, I'm hearing things a little bit differently, and it will be the same for you too. So really listen, like in that moment when you've made your decision. You can leave it for a couple of hours, go listen to something else, and then come back and really listen again to see if the decisions you made were the right decisions. So now let's hear the Neve on this one. Let's see what the Neve will do. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Just gonna stand there and hear me cry. But that's alright because I love the way you lie. I love the way you lie. I don't know what it is with Neve and harshness on the top end. I'm not liking how the vocal is coming through. Okay, let's listen to the API version again and just be sure. Just gonna stand API. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Hear how smooth that sounds, but then compared to the Neve, just gonna stand there and watch me burn. There's this harshness to it that I'm not really liking for this song in this particular situation. In another situation, it might just be what I want, but for this particular situation, it's not cutting. It's not cutting it at all. Oh, and for the low mids, I can only go from, or for the lows rather. Also, this has only 2 bands of EQ. So you have the high shelf, you have the mid range, and you have the low mid. And I can go from, I'll call this low, not even low mid, because this one is the filter to do the high and the low cuts. And then this, I can only go from 35 all the way up to 200, which is really the low range. So I can't even EQ out that, I can't take out that 900, hertz area that I wanted to take out, or that I took out from the other emulations. So let's compare all these 3. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. Again, for the Plugin Alliance, the API wins it for me, followed by the SSL this time around, and then the Neve comes in last. I know that if I go into all of these individual EQs and really try to tweak it a little bit more, I should be able to get a much more decent sound. But then the character that they add right off the bat, that's something you really want to be aware of when you are choosing an EQ. Really listen for what character they are adding to the sound, and hear if it's helping your sound or if it's going to make you do a lot more work for you to get to your desired destination. And that's really something you should really look out for. So in this case, for the Plugin Alliance, I think I'm going to favor the API. For the IK Multimedia, I'm also going to favor the API, but for the waves, I'm going to favor the SSL. So since we have the waves on the SSL and the other 2 on the API, now let's switch between these 3 and then try to hear which one sounds best overall. So let's start with where are we at now? Plugin Alliance. Let's start with that. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Let's do IK Multimedia. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. Let's do waves. Just gonna stand there and watch me burn. But that's alright because I like the way it hurts. So yeah, from the look of it, it's going to be one of these 3 for me. Either the IK Multimedia API, the Plugin Alliance API, or the Waves API. So I really have to sit down with these 3, really listen, if this was a full song or a complete song, I really listen at different sections, intro, verse, chorus, and really know which console EQ is going to really impact the sound in the way that I like, that's favorable for the song, and then just, you know, go with that. What that helps you achieve is you get to your sound, your desired sound, a lot faster without, you know, necessarily doing a lot more work, other than when you have to use the wrong EQ and then you have to do a lot more work for it to get to your desired results. And you find out that after tweaking that EQ, you need to do a little bit more to maybe remove harshness or do all of that, which might not necessarily be necessary. Right, so this generally is how I approach EQing vocals. There really isn't so much that you need to do, you know, when it comes to EQing vocals. You just need to know the frequency ranges that are responsible for mod, rumble, harshness, sibilance, you know, all of these things. Once you know them, you just go to those particular frequency bands and attack those frequency ranges as the song requires, you know, or as you see fit. Don't just go sweeping randomly and then, you know, boosting and cutting and then boosting 12 dB. When you boost something at 12 dB with a very narrow EQ, with a very narrow Q, you are going to hear really everything will sound nasty to you. Everything will sound out of place. At least 6 dB of boost. You can go higher, right, for you to really, you know, zone in and hear what you really want to do. But then be sure that that particular sound is really, if you're going to take it out or if you're going to boost it, is really going to help the sound overall. So yeah, that's really how you approach EQing vocals. And always be sure to EQ in the context of the entire song, so that whatever frequency you are taking out or adding is not going to mask another frequency of another signal, or is not going to make that one that you are tweaking get lost in the entire mix. So EQ in the context of the mix, know the frequency ranges that are responsible for rumble, mod, nasaliness, harshness, sibilance, and all of that, and just deal with those particular frequencies and leave the rest of the frequencies alone. You don't have to go in and tweaking everything. Come on, you really don't need to do all of that, right? So yeah, I hope this helps you start off on your EQ journey, or if you've already been EQing, you have a little experience EQing, I hope this helps you get better with EQ. So that's it from me for today. Remember to leave me a like or drop a comment, and as well subscribe to this channel. It will really help us all grow, and it will really motivate me to put out more content like this. Thank you to everyone who has subscribed. Thank you to everyone who has liked. Thank you to everyone who has, you know, left me a nice comment here and there. I appreciate you all, and there is so much more to come on this channel. So thank you, and see you in the next video. Cheers.